Hello everybody, and welcome to my next little tutorial on Motionbuilder. And today I will be talking about physics and just kind of making things dangle and spring back and forth, just basic stuff. I'm not a physics wizard or anything. There are people out there who know it much better than I do, but maybe this will help get you going on the right path. In fact, I've actually been doing a bunch of physics at my current job just because I had to do some dangly bits, and so it kind of forced me to learn a little bit. And I figure this would be a great chance for me to put something out there. That'd be kind of cool, right? But I want to give a quick little update on the happenings of me and where have I been and what have I been doing and why have I been gone for so long. And it has to do with a lot. So aside from family, I had a big job change. I actually got poached, and now I am working at a company called IllFonic. So I'm no longer with Cloud Imperium Games. I'm no longer working on Star Citizen, but I am working on The Predator, which is an announced title, which is really cool. I'm really, really excited to be working on The Predator. In fact, I think in one of my previous videos when I talked about working with IllFonic in the past doing contract work, I was saying how much I wanted to work on Predator and I wanted to work with those guys again, and I just really lucked out. They opened a studio here in Austin, Texas, and I get to be a part of that, and I am super, super excited. And so if I seem a little off today, I apologize. I just holidays and family, and they're finally out of town, and I've been going, I really want to do this tutorial. So I made this chain in Maya, as you can see, and I am going to make it move around with physics inside of Motionbuilder. And in games, typically what you want to do is you want to put your root at world 0, which is why my root is at world 0 for this in particular object. If this was on a character, it'd be a different story. If you had like little dangly bits or whatever that you needed to put physics on. This actually has a lot of joints in it. Typically in games, you don't use a lot of joints. And it's because game engines have to calculate all that data, right? So usually you only want a chain of like 2 or 3 joints at most, especially if you have a character with lots of dangly bits. If you're doing something cinematic or something that's going to be baked down and put into game, you can have more joints. So this is my little test, this little chain I made. So just made a chain, made some joints. I try to keep them evenly spaced because keeping things evenly spaced helps out with physics. Let's hop over to Motionbuilder now. So Motionbuilder, there it is. You can see it's under the ground, but I'm going to actually take the root node, which is this locator, and I'm going to raise it up off the ground because I really don't want this below the ground plane. In Motionbuilder, physics thinks the ground plane is quite literally the ground. So if I was to create a physics object and just drop it, it would hit that ground plane and bounce around. Or if I put physics on this chain and try to activate it, it would just shoot up and go all over the place. All right, so here we go. On to the physics. Now, this may be a little bit tedious and long and boring, so if you're catching this on YouTube or watching this video later on, feel free to skip past some of this stuff. Or if you're following along at home, maybe this is a great pacing for you because you can follow along with me, because I'll be creating lots of rigging to make this work. So let me think about this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my elements, and I'm going to grab myself a marker, put it out here. This is going to be my control for the object, and I'm going to align it with this, and I'm going to go into my properties, marker settings, and I'm going to size it up here. And I'm going to change the color, maybe make it orange or something. And then I hit 4 on my keyboard and make it bounding box. That way it feels more like a object. And if I toggle back and forth between X-ray mode and model mode, you can see it disappears, so my my control doesn't get in the way when I want to view my animations. All right, so next thing I want to do is I'm going to create a bunch of nulls. So I'm going to go back to my asset browser, and I'm going to start grabbing nulls, and I'm going to start placing them in here. And here's my little trick that I like to do. I'll grab a null and I'll just start right up here, and then you'll see the trick in a second or a couple minutes. This takes a little while sometimes. So null, null. I'm just going to go down, placing nulls into place. And it really helps to kind of name things as you go to help keep track, because you're going to have to be constraining things to other things and what have you, and it just makes it easier in the future. All right, so now I got my nulls, and I created an extra null, which I technically don't need that. But that was my little hack. I just create one and then I delete it, because what I'm doing is I'm creating a one null to match this, and when I go in and I rename this or start putting things together, I'll be able to easily go 1 is with 1 and 2 is with 2 and so on and so forth. So now I've created a bunch of nulls, which are all sitting down here on the ground at 0, 0. So this is going to represent my joint chain. It's going to be kind of an invisible joint chain. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create a bunch of primitives. So I'm going to go to my primitives. I'm going to go to polysphere. And I'm going to drag a polysphere in here, and I'm going to kind of do the same thing. So polysphere, I'm just going to create a whole bunch of them. Or you can probably select them, copy, paste, and have a bunch up here and just move them down into place. And one more should do it. 13. All right, so it's 13 joints. So it's 13 nulls. There's 13 polyspheres. I also like to have kind of like a buffer, like something that I can go into and out of. It's kind of like put it on the proxy skeleton before I put it onto my final skeleton. It's probably redundant. Probably don't need to do it, but it's just something I like to do. And I'll do that by going to my elements, and I'll create a skeleton. And you can do that. I start with a skeleton root. I'll put it right up here, and that will be similar to the locator that I created. Now I'll go to my skeleton node and start putting in my skeleton nodes. Again, this is my trick, so move that off to the side because I don't want it. If I had to go in and rename these, it just, not that it takes a lot of time, it takes enough time to be annoying. So what I'll do is I'll allow this to name everything for me 1 through 13. And 13. All right, don't need that skeleton. I'll go ahead and I'll delete that. Now I want to connect all these together. So I'm just going to parent. Up the chain. All right, now I've got all my proxy skeleton. In fact, I would probably end up going and calling this like proxy node 1, proxy node 2, proxy node 3, but for demonstration purposes, I'll just leave it as it is right now. All right, so now we need to start lining things up, and this is pretty easy to do. I think I'll line up all my nulls and spheres first. I could probably do it all together, but that's fine. Skeleton root will line up locator, line, translation, rotation. I try to keep everything consistent with translation and rotation, make sure everything is facing the same way, just kind of, you know, future-proofing it so I don't have some sort of weird offset error. So you grab this. Oh shoot, undo. I messed up. I hit parent instead of a line. And let's try that again. Where was I? Right. I'm just gonna go down the list and I'm just gonna line everything up. Translation, rotation. And I parented it again. Oh, darn it. So typically, when I work, I actually like to use a stylus, but I think with this, I'm going to go to the old mouse. All right, where was I at? 5? Yeah, 5. So keeping everything kind of organized right here, we're just, you know, makes things a little bit faster. All right, so I've got all my spheres now lined up. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just grab these polyspheres. Grab the polyspheres. I'm going to scale them down. So they're about that big for now. This is mainly so I can see what I'm working on. So there you go. All right. So I've got everything lined up. Now I'm going to start going in here. I'm going to start creating constraints because I need things to start talking to each other. So I'm going to create a constraint. I'm going to call this, it's a parent-child constraint. So I need to make several of these, so I'll just duplicate. I think I need one more, duplicate. All right, so this is, and it's definitely helpful to rename these. Let's see, rename. I'm going to call this, shoot, chain to reg. I guess I should call it chain control. I'm going to call this rig. That's my rig. Chain. Okay, so this will be my parent, and this will be my child. All right, and I'm going to snap and lock. If I grab this, I can test it by moving it, and I can see it now moves my chain. All right, so the next thing I need my polysphere. So I'm going to call it P to reg. All right, so I'm going to do the same thing. So it's going to be to my reg. So that will be my parent. That will be my child. Snap lock. I'm going to go ahead and save because what happens if we crash? I have to do all this over again. So saving right here. All right, so now the next constraint I need to create is I need to create one to my proxy. I'm going to call this proxy. proxy to rig. So there's my rig. That'll be my parent, and there's my proxy skeleton. That will be my child. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to snap and lock. Then I have one more, which means I'm going to need one more null. So I'm going to grab a null. I'm going to drop that in there. This is going to I'm going to call this physics. And that's just going to be a master node that controls a lot of this stuff. You kind of see how it works out here later when I get things finally finished being hooked up. So that will be physics to rig. So there goes my child, and here's my parent. Snap lock. Now if I grab my rig, I can see that things are moving around accordingly. All right, what's next? I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to start hooking up a few other constraints. This is just kind of getting some of the tedious work out of the way first. So I'm going to insert a folder, and you'll see why I insert a folder. Not just for organization, but it actually speeds things up quite a bit. And I'm going to insert another folder. I'm going to call this one Proxy. This is for the Proxy Skeleton. I'm going to call this one Chain, because this will be for the chain. All right, so under Proxy, I'm going to create a whole bunch of other constraints. So let's get back in here and let's go to ParentChild. And I'm just going to duplicate this a bunch of times. And I'm going to delete that first one. Again, this is, like I said, why rename a bunch of stuff if you don't have to. I want to keep this consistent, joint 1 through 13. And so that's what I did. And then I'm going to go in here. I'm actually going to rename these. I'm going to call these Proxy. This will help me keep track of things as things get more complex. I'm just going to copy that name and paste it down the list. And I wish I had a tool that could do this a little bit faster, more automated. Almost done. So order of operations is very important inside of Motionbuilder, and you'll kind of see this here in a second. So when I grab all three of these Proxy, I'm going to drag them into this folder. If I was to drag it from 13 and drag it up into Proxy, it would actually order these backwards inside the folder from 13 to 1. But in this case, I'm going to grab 1 and put it in there. That way it keeps it 1 through 13. I'm going to create some more constraints real fast. These are parent-child, so I'm going to duplicate again. This is going to be for the main skeleton. Get rid of that one. This will be for the main chain. For speed purposes, we'll just leave this parent-child. Normally I would rename this to like chain or something associated with some particular thing. Oh, I think there's a mistake here. I just noticed. See if I can rectify that real fast. So I'm going to align translation rotation. There we go. It looks like the rest of it is correct. Huh, that was weird. What happens if I grab this and I rotate these up? They go crazy. All right. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drag these into my chain. All right. If I pause for a second, it's mainly because I'm trying to think of making sure I have everything hooked up correctly. All right, so proxy 1. So these are going to be constrained to the nulls. Again, these nulls are like virtual skeletons, essentially. So proxy 1, let's see, null. So this will be the parent, and that will be the child. I'm not going to activate these just yet, and I'll show you why. Parent, child. You end up getting into a rhythm when you do this. Parent and child. Number 6, parent, child. 7. Number 10, parent, child. 11, parent, child. All right, so I got all these now lined up. I'm going to just do a quick double check, make sure I didn't mess something up. So that should be 13. 12, so I'm clicking, as I click over here, I'm looking at this, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, so that's correct. So now what I can do is I can click on the folder and I can see all of my constraints that I put in here. And this way I can go snap and lock. And that's much faster than going through these one at a time, going snap lock as I go down. So there, that's why I did that. And this is very similar, except this time it's the I totally did this backwards. Why did I do this backwards? That's okay. So proxy is not really a proxy. I call this chain. Actually, I take it back. Man, I'm messing up. Mistakes. It's okay. We all learn from mistakes. It's better to try and fail than never try at all, right? So I'm going to unactivate, unlock. Why'd I do this? I messed up. Really what I messed up is the child. I meant to put in my proxy skeleton. It's my fault. So if you made a mistake and you need to clear out your constraints, you can just grab it and drag it off to the side, and it'll clear that panel out. Well, okay, so good news. Oh, you have brighter side. I've already filled out the parent, right? So now all I have to do is the child. So let's start with 1. Parent 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 13. All right. All right, let's try this again. Snap all lock. There we go. All right, now mistakes aside, hopefully, on to the last bit. I think it's because I'm used to it looking like this. And I think that's where my mistake was. I'm just going to swap those around. Okay. All right, so I got parent-child constraints now for the chain. So it's exactly the same. It's like this will be the parent, and that will be the child. Five parent, 5 child. Normally I would talk while I'm doing this kind of stuff. I'd talk about things, but man, this kind of stuff I have to concentrate on or I will make mistakes. Almost done. Then we get to start doing the fun stuff. $12. Why did I make this chain so long? And 13 and 13. All right. SnapLock. All right. All right, now we did all the boring, tedious, monotonous setting up of the things. Now we get to do some fun stuff, something a little more fun. All right, now we get to start adding physics. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to go to my physics properties, and I'm going to need to add a rigid body. And I am going to, I think I'm going to, let me think about this. I will make Polysphere 1 my first rigid body. So I'm going to drag my rigid body onto this, and it's going to give me some settings here. You can see it's updated the physical properties, and I'm going to go from active to passive because this is going to be kind of like a master that's going to drive everything else. So it's going to be passive. Passive also means other things with physics will bounce off of it as well. And I don't need to correct my mass center for that, not a big deal. All right, so now I'm going to go into my physics and I'm just going to call this rigid body, I'm going to rename that, I'm going to call that root. Because I need to know that that's my root object. All right, so this next part is very important. You need to select the next set of polyspheres in order. So I'm going to go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. And then I'm going to grab all these rigid body, this rigid body, a new one. I'm going to grab a new rigid body. I'm going to drop it on the polyspheres, and I'm going to create a new rigid body. I needed to select it in order because it needs to know the hierarchy. Otherwise, it's going to just think it's kind of like a crazy tangled mess of chain. All right, I'm going to call this rigid body chain. And that's fine to keep active. That's fine. I won't worry about any of these other settings for now. These are things that you can play with later as you test your physics out. All right, so now I need to create my virtual joint chain using these nulls. So I'm just going to go ahead and select all these nulls. And I'm going to grab a joint, and I'm going to drag a joint onto those nulls. And it's now populated or created under physics, physical properties. It's created a joint. And I'm going to rename that chain, or I'm going to call it joint chain. All right, so I'm going to then open all these up because I'm going to start associating the spheres with everything. I can't remember if I mentioned this. When I created the joint chain, I created an extra joint right down here at the bottom of the chain. It's kind of not skinned to anything. It's kind of an end joint. It's kind of important to have an end joint on your chains and your physics and what have you. All right, so now I'm going to go and I'm going to start adding these to this. So, oh my gosh, let's see. I'm going to go 1, 1, drag it right here. Then I'm going to go 2 to 3, and I'm going to fill in the next, and then 3 to 4. So I'm grabbing one polysphere and the next one down to associate with each joint or each null. See 4 and 5 here, 5 and 6. 6 and 7. Oops. There we go. Almost dropped it into one that already had stuff in it. Luckily, it gave me a warning saying, "Do you really want to do this?" No, I do not. "12 and 13. And as I get to the very last one, I usually pick one higher. I'll pick like 11 and do like 11, 13 for that end joint that I mentioned. All right. Done. Whew. All right. Ready to test out physics? I think we're about ready to test out the physics. There's some other settings up here you can look at, such as under setup. Right now it's set to be set to ball, so like a ball and socket, so it just rotates in all the different directions. And you have spring and hinge and slider, and hinge, different types of physics you can add. Right for now, we're just going to do the ball, and probably play with a ball and a spring today. All right, I'm going to leave those as is for right now, and I'm going to come down here to solvers, and you can see there's a physics solver. I'm going to drag that. I'm going to drag it up in here, and now it's added solvers. A lot of times you'll see the Hicks rig solvers right down in here as well if you're not using an MB solver. All right, before I click any buttons that are dangerous, I'm going to hit save. And I'm going to go, I'll Some things to think about when you're looking at the solver is the properties. By default, it sets the samples per frame to like 3.0. I think it depends on what solver or what physics you're trying to do. I think for a rope, probably 3.0 is fine. If I was doing a spring, I probably want to bump it to 5.0. And it's just how many samples per frame is it doing the calculations and whatnot. You don't want to go too high. I tried 10. Wow, 10. And man, everything just shot off everywhere. So don't do 10. This is also a place where you can identify a ground plane model. So if I had an extra marker or null I want to throw my scene to identify as the ground plane, I would put this in here and fill that in. And that node actually has to sit outside of the hierarchy of any rigs that you've created. So anyway, yeah. This allowed, remember I said you by default the 0 plane of Motionbuilder is the ground. By putting in a marker null, because that's now defined as a ground, you can actually drop that below 0 and your physics will drop below 0. So I don't know, maybe if you had set stairs descending and you want balls to bounce down the stairs, you could do that. All right. So I'm going to go cross my fingers and hope things don't blow up, and I'm going to click online. No whammies yet. Nothing's live just yet, even though physics is turned on. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to click live. I saw some movement. If I grab this now, I should be able to have physics. Woo, physics. I'm going to undo my movement. Now this is very important as you're doing physics. Don't just turn it off. Actually, turn off it being live first. That's going to freeze all your motion. Then you want to say reset to start, and that's going to reset your chain to the very first starting position of your animation. Then you can click offline. And why would I want to do that? Why I want to do all this and then click offline? It's because this was my initial test. Does everything work? Yes, it does. Everything does work. There's a couple little extra steps I need to do for setup though. But physics does work. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drag all these. I'm going to put it underneath this physics node that I had created earlier. So, and I'll show you why in a second. Well, actually, I'll show you why now. So if I grab this, everything's turned off, right? So if I grab this and I start moving around, you can see it's only grabbing those few things that I constrained to it. One of those happens to be the physics that I set up over here, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these in order like this. Let's see, right there. And the reason why I'm doing this is in case I have to get in here later and start mucking around with connecting things together. It's a little bit easier because, again, order of operation. I'm going to take these. I'm going to parent it to my physics. Now, if I went in and let's say I need to delete my joints for some reason under the joints, under physical properties. Let's say I needed to delete those. Of course, my big head's in the way. The joints, which are right down in here. If you needed to delete those joints for some reason, what would happen is I reapplied them, it would just reorganize things and make things more difficult. So. Anywho, so now if I grab the rig and I move it around, you can see everything is moving with it now, including if I needed to rotate it. And why would I do this? I would do this because what if I had to have a character grab a hold of this chain and pick it up or swing it around or something like that? And why would I want to, under a physics solver, be able to set a start position? Well, let's say this chain was coiled up on a table and a character needed to come and grab that chain and pick it up. Well, you could start the physics out kind of like as a chain crumpled up onto the ground, and that will be your start position. And you come in and hit activate, or when you bake down the physics, he'll just pick it up. It'll be great. Activate it and bake it down. So let me talk about live versus recording. So let's hide a few of these things right now, and let's turn on. Let's go online. Right now, I am, because I've clicked online, I have now activated this as its default pose or position. And unless I click off, that will always be its default start position. Now, when I bake this down, if I had some animation, I don't have any animation. I haven't set any animation on this. When it's time for me to bake, what I would do is I would leave it like this. I would grab all my proxy joints, which I'll do here in a little bit later, and I would bake down the curves to this, and that will activate the actual physics. But for live purposes, I'll just click live and swing this around. Just like that. I am seeing a little bit of jitter on here as well. Live, again, the difference between being live and actually doing a bake is live is not as accurate. It's a good proxy. It's a good way of saying, okay, this is about how it's gonna look, but it's not a one-to-one what an actual physics bake is. So anyway, now this is kind of cool. While I'm live, I'm gonna go ahead and drop this to the ground. I'm just lowering it, and you can see it actually crumbling onto the ground. Again, the ground being the ground plane. Now let's talk about these spheres for a second. Undo this a few times as the physics go crazy. All right, I'm going to turn off physics. All right, so these polyspheres that I had created, which again, let me see if I can organize this a bit. Let me switch screens as well. Maybe you guys can see this a little bit better. All right, so each sphere has mass and weight, right? So the smaller the sphere, the lighter the physical mesh. The bigger, the heavier. So if I come in here and let's do an experiment. See, all my physics are turned off. Let's scale this up real big. Like that, and let's click online. Let's see what happens. Oh, by the way, you have to unselect everything before you activate your physics, or physics don't work. So online, go live. Not much happened. Let's do another little experiment. Set to start. Turn that off. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create another polysphere. Drag them one up in here. I'm going to make this a rigid body as well. So let's go over to physics and rigid body. I'm going to drag it on, drop it onto there. And I'm going to make this passive. All right. So the mass of these polyspheres over here in the chain also act as like a collision. So let's come over here to physics, and I'm going to click online and live. I'm going to select my ball here, and I'm going to just slowly move it towards the chain, and you can see there's now an interaction with the chain as the chain is now bouncing off the ball. As it goes around, stop, bounce. So there you go. Let's click. Now this will be interesting. So what I'm going to do is, because now this sphere is part of this whole rigging physics system. When I hit reset to start, it will, you see it pop right down into place, right to where the starting position is. Let's try another experiment. Let's go physics. Let me go to this. I'm going to go from passive to active. I'm going to just move that guy up there a little bit. Oh, turn this off. Back on. Off and on. And we click live. You see it just it just dropped. Reset to start. I can go to this. I can add bounce and friction and density and all sorts of other things to it. So I think there's like 0 bounce. So I'm gonna crank up the bounce just a little bit and see what happens. Again, turn that off, back on, go live. A little bit of a bounce, you see that? A little bit of a bounce. Reset to start, let's go live. Little bit of a bounce. There we go. Let's go to that rigid body. I'm going to switch that back to passive. So I can add things like friction. So when it collides with something, friction will stick to it and what have you. So let's go back to physics and turn this on again, go live, and let's go drag that sphere through our little chain of balls. Let's actually hide those because I want to see the chain itself. There you go. So there's the chain that I created that's rigged. And I'm just going to bounce that chain around with the ball. Of course, I'm going to get it stuck inside the ball. And there you go. But let's turn this chain into a spring. Let's make it springy so it's less like a chain and more like a spring. So let's unlive that. Let's reset to start. Resets all my physics to start. And I'm going to take my rig and I'm going to rotate that around. And I'm going to make it, I guess I could keep it down, but I think I'm going to point it up. Drop that down here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my joint chain. Well, first it'd be helpful if I turned off my physics. I'm going to go into my joint chain and I'm going to switch it from ball to spring. So there's my spring. This will be kind of funny when I turn this on. So when I go online, I'm going to click live. Looks like nothing happened, but there it goes. The spring sprung over. Now, how can we make this feel more like a spring? Well, let me show you. I'll do this a few times. Set to start. Now remember those polyspheres I was telling you about? There they are. What I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the size from the base to the tip. I'm going from big to small. And what that's going to do is going to add more tension and stiffness to the base where they're bigger. And when it gets to the top, it's going to be a lot smaller and a lot lighter. So I'm going to do this by first making everything really small, maybe like that big, and then I'm just going to unselect the first one, and I'm just going to add a gradient of size to everything. Just right down the list, right down that chain. This will be something I have to play with. I don't know what the exact best scale is for this. So each one that's a little bit bigger is making the spring a little bit stiffer. And I feel like the base is very big right now. So I'm going to just select everything and just scale it all down a little bit more. Maybe about right there. All right. So I turn that off and back on. Go to live. Now if I grab the rig, you can see it's a little bit more springy. It's not falling over. It's more like how you would think of a bed spring or something like that. And if I undo that, grab this, I should be able to take this and I should be able to knock that spring around. So say you had a punching bag, you're doing an animation of a guy like boxing or punching a speed bag or something like that. You could totally set this up and then have your motion capture of your guy doing the speed bag or the kid playing with the little blow-up punching bag. Put physics spheres on his hands and his physics spheres would just start knocking the stuff around like that. So anyway, let's see what else I can do. Let me grab that rig. Let me turn off live because I kind of want to show the finished part of the pipeline. So I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to reset to start. Turn off physics. I'm going to turn physics off altogether. I'm going to grab this and I'm going to set a key. And I'm going to like add some motion to it. Maybe go this way and up. Let's say we've animated a character. He's going to slap a guy in the face with a fish or something. So you put physics on the fish here, and you'd put the put that over there. Set a key. not the greatest animation, but test purposes, right? That is 30 frames, so I'm going to crop my timeline down to 30. Now, what I can do is for pre-vising, for testing, I can go online, live, and just hit play and see what happens. And I can see that this is a little bit low. So let me go to my rig and my F curves and here. And this needs to be higher. And I think I want to make it come a little bit forward. Like so. Yeah, boom, right across the face. Just kind of like drug across it. Oh, that's funny. Oh Lord. Okay, here we go. Let's go back to frame 0. Reset to start. Turn that off. All right. So now we're going to. Okay, we've done our animation. We want to bake down our physics and what have you. So now how do we do that? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my proxy. I'm going to select all of it. This is that proxy skeleton that I created. And I'm going to go to my F curves and I'm going to select rotation because all I want to do with this is I just want to bake the rotation. I don't want any translation. A lot of times physics will add translation and you get a lot of this translational noise. All right, so translation for all this stuff. And I'm going to go to my key controls, which is right here. You can also do this up here in animation, but key controls is cool too. And I'm going to go animation. Oh, make sure everything's turned on. Is physics on? Physics is not on. So I'm going to turn physics on. I'm not going to go live. I'm just going to leave it set to recording. You can see recording. I'm going to select all this proxy, F curves, make sure that rotation's selected. I'm going to go to my key controls, animation. I'm going to say plot selected properties. So it will, everything I have selected, it will plot and only to the properties that I have, which is rotation. I don't need constant key reducer. And plot, and boom, that fast. Let's see how this looks. Now if I go here and I try to slide this, you can see that it's animating, but it's not, we're not getting any physics. Again, it's because we're not live. So let me go back over to my navigator. Let me turn, actually I guess I can leave physics on. I'm going to go to my proxy and I'm going to unactivate by selecting the folder. In my head, there you go. By selecting the folder and just clicking unactivate, and it's now unactivated all that stuff. So you can see it kind of did it. It hit and just went boink and didn't slide across, which means I need to add more frames to my animation. but it came up in it. Whoop. And so let me hide this stuff. Let's go from, instead of 30 frames, let's say 90 frames. All right. So I'm going to reactivate my proxy. You can see it straightened up my chain. I should really color that chain something else, shouldn't I? Let's color that chain real fast to make it easier to see. Maybe something nice and bright. There we go. Brighten it up a little bit. Let's try this again. So I'm going to go back to frame 0. Select that stuff. Animation. That's because I haven't turned off my rigging yet. Plot, selected properties. And if I go to my F curves, wait, make sure I did this right. Animation, plot selected properties. There it goes. All right, so you can see it's added a lot more to this. So let's go test it now. That's silly. But you can see it drug across, and the physics is a little bit better. A little bit better. All right. So now I want to plot it to my, let's say I like it. I've done all the tweaking and adjustments and fixed the things, and the physics looks exactly how I want it. So now it's time to actually plot down to the main skeleton. So it's exactly what I did before, except this time I'm going to select everything, including the locator. And actually, I'm going to select everything, go to F curves. I'll show you why. I'm going to select rotation on everything except for the locator. And on locator, I'm going to select translation and rotation. So and Motionbuilder remembers your selections. So if I select any one of these joints, you can see that only rotation is selected. Only rotation is selected. It's under my head. Whereas this has translation and rotation selected. So I will select everything in that chain and go animation, plot selected properties, plot. All right, so now it's baked everything in. I'm going to turn off my chain from reading. Now it's the chain. The actual joints of the chain are now what's animated. Now we got to kind of do a little bit of smoothing because physics is not the smoothest of animations, right? We got to add a little bit of tweaks to this. So I'm going to select all my joints. Not the locator, don't need that. I'm going to go to my F curves, and let's look at our curves real fast. You can see they're pretty noisy. There's a lot of jitter there. So I want to fix that. I want to fix the jitter. Now, let me tell you the difference between these different filters. I'm going to hop over to my filters here. There's several different types of smoothing options inside of Motionbuilder. You have smooth, you have Butterworth, which everybody seems to love Butterworth. Trust me, you don't want to use Butterworth all the time. Butterworth was developed specifically for noisy curves, and you should not use Butterworth across the board. And then there's transitional smooth, which smooth transition, that's it. So each one does something slightly different. If I was editing motion capture, I would do a smooth. If I had noisy data coming across that was like noisy marker data, I would use Butterworth because that's what Butterworth was developed for. It's got the right algorithm to smooth this out really, really nicely. So I'm going to go to Butterworth. I'm going to use Butterworth on this, and then I'm going to smooth it. Frequency, maybe I'm going to cut this down a little bit, maybe 6, maybe. If you so by just left clicking and dragging back and forth, you can see it's like doing whole numbers. if I right click and drag, you can see it's doing incrementals. So I'm going to maybe about 6.5 or something. I'm going to preview this. You can see it's really taken all that noise out of the curves. So I'm going to accept that. Now that I've gotten most of that jittery noise out of the curves, I don't want to use Butterworth again. What I think I want to use, I want to just use a regular smooth. I'm going to drop the width down to 2. Smaller is better. 1 really doesn't do anything. 4 is probably too much. It can actually destroy your curves. But 2 seems to be a really good number to use when you're smoothing your curves. So I'm going to preview that. Oh, I just have a little bit of selected there. Let me try that again. Smooth. If you don't, again, if you select something, it will only smooth that thing that you selected. If you have nothing selected, it will smooth everything. Yep, that looks good. So there, the springy chain got picked up and drug across the sphere. I should have made a fish. I should have attempted to model a fish and animated that. All right, so now what we can do is we can go like one step further, per se. You could take this group of chains and you could create an animation layer, and then you could emphasize certain parts of the physics motion, kind of like motion editing your physics. So let's say, oh gosh. Let's say you wanted a bigger bounce on this end. And you know, or the director says, I want a bigger bounce. And you don't want to go through all the trying to reset the physics up and try to get that bounce to be a little bit bigger. But you're like, man, I could just add a couple of keyframes onto this. It'd work great. So you could come in here and be like, all right, well, here's my 0 key, set a key. Come down here, make sure I'm on local and not global. Kind of like bend it down a little bit. Oops, too much. And then let it bounce back a little bit. Or I could just hit 0 and come back about that much. Maybe droop down a little bit more. So you can see you can add to your physics after you've done your physics. Just kind of like hits and drags across. That's so funny. Alrighty then. I think I'm just about done with this tutorial for today, and I think I had a good time. I hope everything came across clearly. I had to redo all my setup with microphone and the cameras and everything. And if you liked this tutorial, if you like watching Motionbuilder, you know, go ahead and hit that follow button. That'd be super awesome to get more followers. Please spread the word if you want to help. Just say, hey, look, there's Motionbuilder teaching and training here on this channel. Also hit my YouTube channel up and subscribe, where when things disappear off of Twitch, they are still on YouTube and will probably be there forever. And with the new COPA that's happening, I might have to put the 18 years or up for whatever reason, because, you know, protecting the kids and stuff. So that could be a thing. But yeah, please go and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I'll try to continue to put Motionbuilder tutorials up as whenever I can. Again, I'm very busy with my job, and everything, and family, and I'm not a professional streamer or YouTuber or Twitcher or any of that stuff, so I just kind of do this when I can. If anybody has any questions, there's a Discord. Go ahead and hop on the Discord, go subscribe to that, and get in the channel, and you can ask questions, and I'll try to answer them the best I can. I also try to answer questions that are asked on YouTube, so you can ask questions there. And let's see here. I think I'm going to leave with a little something. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this music here. I'm going to head over here. Just give me a second. I'm going to type something up real fast. All right. Okay. So I mentioned this earlier. I am working on a really cool title. It is announced. I'm excited about this. I'm working on Predator Hunting Grounds. Not that commercial. Video play after ad. All right, hold on.
To the mission. We're moving out. For the players.
All right, PlayStation. I'm man, I am excited about this game. Can't tell you much about it other than I had an opportunity to work on several of those animations that you saw in that trailer, and along with David Peng and Travis Conklin, and we all had a great time doing contract work. And now that I'm officially at IllFonic, I am super stoked to be working on it, and I'm over the moon. I'm super happy. All right, so I guess let me throw some of this music back up here. There we go. Thank you. Thanks again to all of you for tuning in. And again, hit me up on Discord if you have any questions, and I will catch you all again in the future. I guess I should have. I guess I should have taken off the show will begin shortly.